Michelle Judd, and I'm part of the family here at Bay City Vault Lines, and we're going to go through the history of the company today. With me today, presenting also is Captain Todd Shorkey.
Morning.
And present with us are the owners of Bay City Vault Lines and my parents, Bill Langford, at a table back here. Also Sherry Clements, she's our tour guide. She'll be narrating our 1 o'clock tour today if you choose to buy a ticket and stay for that. And my son Matthew Judd is right out at the gate here. So we are a family company. So looking at Bay City Vault Lines, first we have to go back before the company was founded to 1983. So Bay City was a very different place, and if you're from here, you know that. So when my family chose to move to Bay City, I was much younger. My parents decided to come here and start basically a new life and a new business. There were no passenger vessels available on the river from here. There were no beautiful rail trails and parks along the river, at least not in the state they are now. Lighthouse, it's here, and as it is now, was not accessible. 3rd Street Bridge had been gone, the Winona Hotel was gone, so downtown Bay City was suffering a bit, was not as well trafficked. People were shopping out in the suburban areas, malls became popular. So there was also a loss of industry in the area, so very different than what we're seeing today. So my parents, Bill and Elaine Furnier, bought a vacant building in downtown Bay City. And if you may recognize this as the former C.E. Rosenberry furniture store, sits at the corner of 3rd and Water Street, was originally built as the Campbell House Hotel. And I think when they came to town and bought that, people thought, are you crazy? What are you doing? But they bought that and used it as home base for a business of selling antiques. That was the main business they operated here in Bay City. And over time, that business grew to draw travelers in from all over the country. So their main business was traveling around selling antiques out of state. And another thing they had noticed when they moved here was, like everybody else, they wanted to know how you could get on the river, how you could go see the lighthouse, how you could experience the bay, and that didn't exist. So this is kind of planting the seed for what came later. And today, you've been to the Antique Center. It's a really vibrant, active location. So a lot of the visitors coming to the Antique Center, thousands and thousands a year, asked about, how to get on the river, the bay. Because when you look at a map of Michigan, you see that we look like we're right on Saginaw Bay, and naturally they want to see that. And conversations with other people revealed an interest in, helping to bring a boat to Bay City and start, providing this access. So Bill Furnier, along with 2 other partners, Scott McIntyre and Chick Ferris, had this idea, and they decided to, locate and start up a business running a boat. And they found one in Ohio, and it was actually purchased and brought here in 1998. And that's the vessel that you're sitting on right now. So this was the very first vessel that Bay City Vault Lines purchased, and the company began operating. So this is a look at what the Princess Winona looked like as she was built. She was known as the William M. Miller. She was built for Miller Boat Lines. She operated on Lake Erie, so near Sandusky to South Bass Island. So this was a ferry boat. Behind the bar that we have today, there was a ramp. Its hinge would flip down. I'll show you a picture of that. So they would bring vehicles into this lower deck here. So she's an old girl, right? Built in 1954. But very well maintained. She's still running great. We've had a lot of work done on her and a lot of maintenance every year to keep her in the shape she's in. So her original capacity would have been for 254 passengers, but because she carried vehicles, it normally would have been, was it about 12 vehicles and 100 passengers, roughly? So she was then renamed the Princess Winona and began her first season here in Bay City. And so this is 2 of the original owners, or partners, Scott McIntyre and Bill Furnier. The 3rd partner, Chick Ferris, was a marine contractor and a tugboat captain. He left the company very early on and unfortunately passed away quite young in 2008 at the age of 55. Scott McIntyre actually did exit the company also in 2003, leaving our family to continue running the boat lines for the last 20 years now. So we now have 3 generations working for the business. So in addition to other employees, my parents, myself, and I have 3 young adult children that all work here and grew up here since they were very small. Another look at the William M. Miller, and this is sitting at Miller Boat Lines, and you can see back in the very corner another boat sitting behind her, and that will figure into our conversation as well. So there were actually 2 boats very similar in design. The Miller was built in '54, the one sitting behind it's a little bit older, and that was the West Shore. So she looks very similar, even the paint is very similar to what she is now. But she was sitting there vacant. They were actually upgrading to newer vessel. So taking her out of service. So you can see the stern here, that ramp, and so it went all the way up where we've opened it up to have a nice opening and a beautiful view behind the wake view bar here. So that was the change that was made. And we'll give you a chance to walk the boat a little bit when we're through and see the upper deck areas. You can see here a passenger cabin that existed directly above us. So there was a walkway around the outside of the Miller and an enclosed passenger cabin in the center area. So that was actually removed before she came to Bay City at a shipyard in Ohio. So bringing the boat here, our very first site is actually about where we're sitting now, here at Winona Park in 1998. And this site had been occupied by the Lake Guardian, which was an EPA research vessel that was operating for a time out of Bay City. And when that vessel left, we were able to have the opportunity to dock the Princess Winona here. So why the name Princess Winona? If you're local, you've heard this name, Winona Street, Winona Park, Winona Hotel. So it's a historical name that's been in use in Bay City for many years. And there was a mosaic of the Princess Winona that existed for a period of time. It was at the Winona Hotel, correct? And then at City Hall, is it a museum now, Sam?
Yes, the mosaic.
Yeah, so the mosaic is now visible at the museum. So we wanted to keep a name that was, a nod to local history. And so that's the name that was chosen for her. In the photo here, you can see some of our staff early on. The first historian that provided commentary for our tours was Tom Moore. His wife, Lonnie, actually had Native American heritage, and she loved to dress up as Princess Winona for special events on the boat. So she's in the photo. Along with our original captain, John Harder, my parents, and one of our early staff, Trish Lord. So here's Mayor Kathy Newsham christening the Princess Winona with her new name, and you can see the logo and the design as it still exists on the boat. So we were off and running on our first tours in 1998. And we had a reception on the boat with a lot of, dignitaries and a lot of people. You can see a catering table running right down the center where you're seated now. So lots of fun, lots of fanfare, lots of excitement when this boat came to Bay City. So this is our original captain, John Harder, and he had a long history of working on the lakes here. I believe he was from the Bayport area, from a family that had lots of experience on the water. So he was with us for the first several years, and my kids always talk about Captain John because whenever they would go up to visit him in the wheelhouse, he gave them bubble gum. So not too much longer, we had another vessel join the fleet in 2000. So this was Islander, and she was built in Superior, Wisconsin in 1946. So another old, sturdy girl. When you see her next to the Princess Winona, she looks much smaller. She actually carries 126 passengers, more than you would think. She's built much squattier, lower to the water line. Her freeboard, which is the distance from the deck to the water, is not as high as the Princess Winona. We sit here, I think, 53 inches up. Islander probably sits a little over 24. She was used as a ferry boat as well in the Apostle Islands in Wisconsin. She had a very open deck originally in the back, and I didn't include that photo, but she had a few cars that would fit on the back and then a very small upper deck. Later was modified to be more enclosed, and her upper deck was lengthened. She was taken to Chicago and was operating as a tour boat on Chicago River, and she had a pretty wild paint job, as you can see here. The Islander is 53 feet long. And you can see here arriving in Bay City, her very colorful paint, and the news turning out to do a news story when she came down the Saginaw River. The Islander is now has a slightly different paint job, but we've toned down the red quite a bit. She had a lot of fun animals on her. The reason Islander became available is she was operated by a family in Chicago, the Chicago Fire Boat Company, Captain Schummel. And Captain Schummel, unfortunately, was murdered. And his family just closed the business, kind of never looked back, and put her up for sale. So a long ride from Chicago all the way up Lake Michigan, under the Straits, and back here to Bay City. So quite a ride. They had some adventurous weather on that trip. But she made it safely, a good sturdy boat. Currently, Islander is in layup. She's way, way down under the Lafayette Bridge. You can see a little white object on the right. And she's decked at the middle grounds right now. And she's in layup. We're just using the Princess Winona this season. So she was renovated also extensively. The upper railing was removed. There was a stairwell at the stern that was taken out. And a new structure was built, a frame, so that we could have a canopy over the entire top deck. So you can kind of see on the upper photo there that she had a wide open deck with no cover, and now she's been changed to have a frame. So that canopy was custom built. We had a canvas made to cover that, new hull paint and updates inside. So this is how the Islander turned out. She looks substantially different. But really nice for touring, kind of open views on that boat. So we used her for a lot of tour boats. So she came down and was aboard here with us at Winona Park and went into service in 2002. The very next year, we were actually asked to relocate a bit. This is the second site that we occupied just under the Betts Bridge here. There used to be a little gazebo right there in the former Horak building, which you might remember is the former Sears property. So we moved both of the boats down there, and we were back to there in 2003, and that's when, the same time that Scott McIntyre left the business. So there's a shot of the Princess Winona at what we call the Horak dock at that time. So now when I go down there and look at that, I think, wow, that was tight quarters. We had two boats nose to nose, so it took a little doing to get them in and docked right next to each other in a tight space. And the Islander was docked there as well. You can see the ramp that we had going. We actually boarded onto the upper deck of the vessel at that time. One of the interesting things we've seen over the course of the years is how much the water level does fluctuate from, goes in cycles. And over the past 25 years, it's gone up and down and changed. So we would at times board the Islander on the upper deck and at times on the lower. So our third site was a little further down yet, the former Bay Acre property. So if you recall, Industrial Braunhuis was located to our south along the river, and there was also a terminal for ships to offload items at the Bay Acre property. They relocated out further to the north, closer to the bay. So we had the opportunity to move to that site in 2008. And you can see that a third boat has appeared in that picture. We'll talk about that. So we did a lot of work to get that site ready to go. New concrete, we had fencing, planters, and we built a custom ramp for the Islander that stayed fixed. So instead of picking up a really big heavy ramp every time we needed to board and disembark, we now had a fixed ramp on shore to reach that upper level. There was a lot of parking there. We had a great big fenced area and deep water because it had been used for large vessels already. One of the really cool things there was being able to watch the fireworks festival directly across from the place where they shoot them off in Betts Park. So we had a great view there and a big party every year for that. So there's the West Shore, which we're going to see in that photo, and you can see she looks very much like the Princess Winona. That's the boat that was sitting at Miller Boat Lines when the Princess Winona was originally purchased. So we added the West Shore during this period, and she was built in Sturgeon Bay in 1947, a large capacity boat like the Princess Winona, also built for Miller Boat Lines. When she was available at the time that the Princess Winona was purchased, but the partners opted to just bring one boat, that was enough to get started with. So in the meantime, the West Shore had actually been sold to Beaver Island and was being used as a freight vessel out there for a period of time. So it was actually purchased from a company up on Beaver Island and brought here. We began renovations on that boat. It did not actually go into service for Bay City Boat Lines. We were kind of working on it, but around 2008, the economy started to, we had a big housing bubble, lots of other things going on. So it kind of went on pause, and we kind of were working on it a little bit, but not really active. When Starline from St. Ignace came looking for a vessel. So some of the contracts had changed up in the St. Ignace area, contracts for boats servicing Mackinac Island, and they had an opportunity to pick up a freight contract and they needed a vessel. So they came looking and asked us, and we agreed to sell the West Shore to Starline. And she left here in 2012 and has been fully refurbished and operates as the Anna Mae. She really looks beautiful now, and every time I go out to St. Ignace, I always like to go see her. They named her after a board member, completely refurbished the boat. Was just up in Mackinac last week and talked to one of the captains on Starline, and he had his solo trip as a new captain on this boat, so he was really excited to hear from us. And I shared with him some of the older pictures of West Shore. He really enjoyed that. So now we've gotten past 2012, and yet again we are moving to a new location. So after operating in the Bay Aggregates property for a period of time, the Uptown development was finally under construction and taking shape, and we needed to vacate that property. So where to go? There's just not a lot of places on the river that can accommodate our operation, especially with two boats. So we were actually able to find a site out on the Middle Grounds Island, so about a mile south of here, at a place that you may know as Scotty's Sandbar. And Scotty's had not been back in business yet. It was kind of a vacant property at that time. But there were pilings from piers that had existed on that property in the past. And the owners, Scott and Jill Causley, agreed to rebuild one of those piers and provide a home for us. So you can see we were able to take both of the boats out there. And now we have a really different docking operation. Instead of coming in parallel to the seawall like we do here, we had a little more difficult docking arrangement because we're coming in on the pier and we have to dock perpendicular to the river current. So that was challenging at times, depending on the wind and the current, challenging for our captains to navigate. But we had a good system figured out and worked well. And you can see, as big as this boat feels, when you're right next to the lake freighters going by, they seem very small. But we had a great view out there and of all the lake traffic. And of course, Scotty's now is a very popular location, live bands, and a lot of boaters, they've since put in transient docks. So So we were there for 7 seasons through the first year of COVID. So 2020 hit, and it was rough. So we did not know if we were going to be able to operate up until the June. We got ready, hoping that we were going to be able to go, and just prepared as if, and finally determined that we could probably operate but go 50% capacity. So that was kind of a big hit to the company. We found a lot of people really grateful and happy that we were still operating, they could get out and do things. But with that, and also the impending work coming out on the Lafayette Bridge, we knew that we probably needed to get back to downtown into a more visible location to really get the company back going. So Bay Future, which is our local economic development, helped us kind of work on that project and were able to assist us in getting a lease back here in downtown Bay City. So we made it through COVID. Our staff was great. They were troopers. We all wore masks even on those really hot days. And but I had people show up here from even out of state. They drove here just to take a tour because they were so excited there was something to do. So it was really rewarding to still be operating. So Site 5 finally back in home in Winona Park, in our namesake park in 2021, and really happy to be here. Great partnership with the DoubleTree Hotel and all the events going on in downtown Bay City. So what keeps us busy? Basically tours and parties. So one of the things that we did right from the very first year were operate history tours. They were actually free to the public. So the company, Bill and partners felt that the best way to introduce this new business to Bay City was to get as many people on the boat as possible and make it really a warm welcome. So enlisted sponsors that underwrote a week of tours each, and we're able to take people out on free tours every year since 1998. So this will be our 26th season actually operating those free tours. So weekday mornings from 10 until noon for a few weeks, depending on how many sponsors we get. We still do those. So Sherry and our other lovely lady, Nancy Rouse, provide the narration on those tours. Originally, it was first come, first serve, so you just had to get here, and we'd take as many as we could until we were full. That got a little difficult, so we went to having actual reservations for that now, and still do. So we've served thousands and thousands of visitors with that, and it's people kind of wonder what the catch is, like how it can be free. I don't know of anywhere else that operates something like this, and we're really proud of doing this, and our staff really enjoys being able to provide them. So we still have local sponsors. Some have been with us for years and years. And then some new sponsors come in from time to time. So we've had as many as 10 weeks. This year we're doing 5 weeks. They'll be coming up starting the end of June. So it was a great way to introduce the boat. And we also serve a lot of really cool people that just get so much enjoyment out of it, or wouldn't otherwise be able to get on a boat or enjoy our waterways and hear the history. So just some of our special passengers that we've had there with our crew, and the picture on the right is Captain Todd with our narrator, Nancy, who is not here today. In addition to that, we do other paid tours. So on the picture on the left, you can see the Princess Winona heading out in the mouth of the river there near Consumers. We had the Paul Tregurtha, the largest ship on the lakes, visiting us fairly regularly last year, dropping coal at Consumers. Since they're phasing out coal production at that plant, the Tregurtha won't be visiting us any longer, but she's too big to come down the river like the other freighters do. So it was really awesome to see her out there. So we do regular tours, like this afternoon at 1, we'll have our river tour heading out to the mouth and back. And then we also do some really fun things. We do dinner and entertainment cruises with live bands on Friday and Saturday evenings. And that's something that's, our business has really transitioned to this idea of doing a lot of ticketed events. When we started out, we did the history tours, and other than that, it was primarily private charter. But now we see so many people coming into Bay City, a lot more traffic, and we're able to support a stream of visitors with paid events. So that's something that's a real change and really sped up with COVID. So we still do private parties, class reunions, weddings, fundraisers, all types of things. So we have a great staff. Some of the young ladies doing catering grew up with my kids, work here, go through college, move on. So it's been a nice group that's worked here. We've also been fortunate to participate in some very cool special events. So taking passengers out to greet the Edson when she arrived here in Bay City in 2012. So she was pulled in by a tugboat and docked temporarily in Essexville, and we were able to be there for that occasion. One of our favorites are the Tall Ships festivals that visit Bay City about every 3 years. And we're one of the favorite ports of the Tall Ships because Bay City is such a warm and welcoming host. So during that time, we're very, very busy. We run lots of special events and take guests out for tours during that festival. And of course, the Fireworks Festival. So we regularly host fundraiser cruises for the festival. We've been operating those and donating the ticket sales from those cruises for, I think, just about as long as we've been operating. So we do try to be a really good citizen in the community, kind of give back and get people out here with us as much as we can. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Captain Todd, and he's going to talk a little bit more in detail about this particular boat and how it operates.
So just a couple of numbers on the Princess Fiona. Michelle's mentioned a couple of them, but this boat is 96 gross tons. The captain's on here licensed for 100 tons, so we're good there. But it's a big heavy boat. You can see the thickness of the steel, how well built it is. It had to be well built to be a ferry boat for carrying cars. It can operate in the ice. So it's a very sturdy boat, almost 65 feet long. The beam, or the width, is just over 30 feet. And at the start of the boat, the draft is 7'3". And towards the front, if you look at the draft bar, it's about 4 feet. So at its deepest point, almost 8 feet in the water. And I thought it'd be kind of interesting for people to see the engine room. I mean, we have so many people on board the boat and get to see everything, but they don't see the workings down below and how things look and what operates the boat. So this is the original electrical panel, 36-volt panel from when the boat was built. And if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it looks kind of like a horror movie switch. We call it the Frankenstein switch, effectively, and that turns on the power. And the 36-volt system runs all the lighting and starts the main engine. So I thought that's kind of neat to see that. The main engine, it's a Caterpillar D326 6-cylinder marine diesel. It's the original motor that was in the boat when it was built. And as Michelle mentioned, it's been upgraded and well maintained, and she runs like a top. So it's a great running boat. 380 horsepower. The fuel tank down below holds 1,500 gallons. And the propeller, it's got a single propeller and a single rudder. And the propeller's 4.5 feet tall. So if it was sitting here next to me, it'd probably come up to my chest level here, the propeller itself. So this boat takes a little bit more to operate because it's only a single screw with a single rudder, so it comes down to the seamanship a little bit more for docking and maneuvering. A lot of the freighters and bigger boats will have a stern thruster or a bow thruster or twin propellers to help to steer it. So the pictures down here, I mentioned the 36-volt electrical system. On the right-hand side is the generator that runs our 110-volt electrical system, which runs our coolers and some of the electrical plugs on the boat. And then on the left, that's our fire pump and dewatering pump. So if we had to pump out water from a hole, or if we had to run our fire hose, which is right behind me, that would be the pump that would do that. So just kind of a quick look at the engine room and kind of some of the things that people don't normally get to see. I thought that would be kind of nice. Up in the wheelhouse, very simple controls. You get the big wheel, you have a hand throttle, and you have a transmission lever that either is forward or reverse. And if you look above your heads, you can see two cables running along the ceiling of the vessel. Those are the steering cables. They come down from the wheel in the wheelhouse, they run to the back, go down into the rudder room, and that controls the rudder. So actually during the trip, you can see those cables moving back and forth, and that's actually the captain up in the wheelhouse turning the wheel to steer the boat. So if you're ever on here and you see those cables moving, that's the actual rudder going back and forth. We have a great crew, great deckhands that do our line handling, getting us off the dock. You'll hear signals when we leave the dock. You'll hear one long blast on the air horn. That's us leaving the dock. That means we're underway. If we operate astern, you'll hear 3 blasts on the horn. That's us backing away from the dock. So we still use horn signals to this day like they did in the old days. On the river itself, navigation can be kind of tricky at times because Michelle already mentioned the currents. The Saginaw River can flow in 2 different directions. It can flow inbound and outbound both depending on the wind. Traditionally, the outbound flow is to the north, and it's one of the few rivers that actually flows to the north instead of the south. So that's kind of an interesting fact. There's a channel that we have to stay in for operating for the most part. The channel begins out in the Saginaw Bay, 13.5 miles out from shore to the mouth of the river. And then from the mouth of the river by the power plant to Saginaw, it goes another 18 miles. So it's a pretty long navigation channel. It's dredged to 27 feet at the mouth of the river, and it goes shallower as you head upriver to 22 feet. The channel was originally dredged in 1865. That's when the channel from Saginaw to Bay City to the mouth of the river was dredged. And then 2 years later, in 1867, they dredged from the mouth of the river out into the bay to allow larger vessels to come in to the river to bring cargoes in. And there's a picture below the waterline. You can see underneath the Princess Winona, you can see the rudder and the different color. Every 5 years, these boats have to be dry docked, taken out of the water and inspected by the Coast Guard. And they inspect the steel to make sure everything's still to the proper thickness and no problems, and any maintenance has to be done below. The boat gets cleaned below, get all the zebra mussels and everything off, and gets us through the water easier. So that's always an interesting trip every 5 years too, because there's nowhere around here really that can do that kind of work. So we've been in the past to Windsor, Ontario, Detroit, St. Ignace. So it's always a nice trip on the boat to go to those places to have that maintenance done. And there you can see the Islander out of the water for her 5-year inspection. And underneath her, the propeller and the rudder. And I think Michelle can speak better on Homeland Security after 9/11. I'll let her handle that part. But with the crew training, we've been fortunate here at Bay City Boat Lines because a lot of the crew members over the years have been firefighters, police officers, people in public safety, medically trained. So it's just that extra factor of safety on board the boat when you have those crew members on. Every year we do lots of training. We do man overboard drills. We were required to do a certain number of man overboard drills. We do firefighting drills. We do medical emergency simulations, anything like that, just to keep the crew on point and up to date and ready to go if an emergency does happen. We do a lot of our man overboard drills during our history tours, and it's always fun for the people to watch as we throw a life jacket over the side, come around, pick it up, and they can actually see how a man overboard drill works and what we do in the case of a real emergency. But I'll give the microphone back to Michelle, and she can talk a little bit about security.
Okay. So yes, lots of changes in our 25 years of operation. One of the biggest things we had was Homeland Security. So after that, they determined that there's a new department created and yet another layer of regulation. We already have a lot oversight because we're operating under Coast Guard, Department of Transportation. So there's a lot. I have a great big book that I update every year, getting ready for our inspection. So that brought about new regulation, and our vessel size was so large that we were considered a terrorist target, and any facility we docked at also needed to be a secure facility. So we had a lot of changes in handling passengers and boarding and keeping a security plan up to date. One thing we ended up doing was actually dropping our capacity voluntarily a bit so that we are now not at that highest level of security and just to operate a little bit more freely. every time something happens around in the world that has, to do with a boat that was an emergency or a negative situation, you can bet that we're going to have something coming down the pipe that affects us. So a couple of things we've had happen were a boat capsized on a lake in New York. So they determined that the stability of the vessel, too many people on the upper deck, they needed to take a closer look at that. They actually recalculated the stability of every vessel in the U.S. because the average weight per person has increased over time. So they reduced our capacity for that. That was before we even dropped it for down to the 150 that we stay licensed at today. So the size of your vessel determines what kind of life-saving equipment you have. The route that we travel also affects that. So we mainly maintain a river route. This boat actually was built for the Great Lakes, so we could go anywhere. If we're not carrying passengers, we can go to, Windsor or the Soo or anywhere we need to go. With passengers on board, we have a designated route that we travel, and that's approved by the Coast Guard, and they inspect all of the safety items on our boat to make sure that's appropriate. And then recently there was a vessel that had a fire. So this year, fire safety was the update from the Coast Guard, and we're going to check out that we were up to date on running fire drills and all our fire equipment. So always something new to keep up with. We're very closely regulated. So just a bit about our community impact, which I think is really interesting. Annually, we carry about 8,000 passengers right now. It's been kind of varied, like between 8 to 12, depending on the year. Since COVID, of course, it dropped down and we're recovering from that. We operate at least 230 hours of actual time on the water. Of course, there's many more hours beyond that we spend on the boat preparing for the trips. Cleaning up after, and also the maintenance that goes on. I don't know that people realize what it takes to keep this vessel operating in the condition it needs to be to operate. We're averaging about 100 departures annually right now, and we have a seasonal crew of 15 to 20 people. So we can run the boat for tours with a captain and 2 deckhands. That's our minimum requirement, but we typically have more people on the boat than that. We'll have a tour guide, we might have a couple catering staff, we might have a couple bartenders, so we can have up to 8 staff operating. So small dedicated crew. We have some crew that have been with us for many years. Our other Captain Guy's been here 20 years. I think Todd's on 13. Started as a deckhand and seasoned his way up to captain, so we're really excited about that. So connecting with the community, we are doing 20 of the free sponsored tours this year. We work closely with other local businesses for any services that we need to operate the boat, including our catering. We have a partnership with Krejak House Restaurant, another family-owned business, and we really like to support family businesses and small businesses. We're docked next to the DoubleTree, so we work closely with them as well, and the park system and other downtown businesses. We really enjoy sharing our history. That's one of the things that we have really been focused on. Of course, Bill and Elaine come from a background in antiques, so naturally something they like anyway. And way back to our first historian, Tom Work, who was also actually an antique dealer. Providing that access on the water has been really amazing. If you grew up here but you didn't have a boat, know somebody that had a boat, you could go your entire life and not have ever gotten on the Saginaw River. And it's really eye-opening to see how different the community is from the water and to see everything that exists along the way. So it's really cool to see people that are very excited about that. And now getting people coming back that maybe their first experience here was as a child with their parents on a history tour or on a school field trip. And now they're coming back and they say, oh, I remember I was on this when I was a kid, and now they're an adult going home. So our impact on tourism is also substantial. When we started out, most of our business was local. It's actually flipped to be predominantly out-of-town visitors on the boat. When I look at the numbers for us, our history tours are still quite local, but 54% of those visitors come from zip codes outside of Bay City and Essexville. Our other tours, 74% of our passengers do not live in Bay City or Essexville. And our entertainment tours, same thing, 72%. So we're really drawing in a lot of people, not just from the Tri-Cities, Saginaw, Midland, but well beyond. And we've really seen a change the last few years of people discovering Bay City and telling us how much they enjoy it. And gosh, I've driven by for years. I finally found Bay City and I love it. So it's really nice to see us kind of getting on the map that way. And lastly, I think one of the most rewarding things for me has been the connection with a longtime crew here and then seeing the family grow with the business. So when the business started, my first child was an infant and now I have 3. So they've been around here, they were playing on the boats, but they've grown up working on the boats, and now they're young adults. And it's great to have that, so that we're all together. And then we've got a crew that's been very dedicated and enjoys working here, and we really appreciate that. So just a few shots of the crew. A lot of you may recognize Captain Guy, also known as Santa. He actually for many years worked as a Santa in the winter months when he leaves the area. So we've had a lot of fun. We've worked really hard with this business, but it's been really a labor of love. That's something we've enjoyed doing for the community. And that's the end of our presentation. We have some time before we did pretty good. So we do have a tour at 1 o'clock today. We will be boarding passengers at 12:30 for that. But up until that time, if you'd like to, wander around, check out the boat, we can open the wheelhouse. Captain Todd can give you a peek inside if you'd like to do that. So feel free to hang out for a little bit. Come ask us any. Do you have any questions right now you wanted to ask? Yes.
How many miles per gallon?
How many miles per gallon? She's quite efficient in the water, actually. Do you know?
I don't know miles per gallon, but she is very efficient.
Yeah, I figured it out at one point, and I can't recall the number, but she is surprisingly efficient in the water. And she turns on Bill says she turns in her own shadow, so she can kind of spin around in a circle. And yeah, she actually handles quite nicely. Yeah. But still, 1,500 gallon float is a lot.
Doesn't go so slow.
Yeah, we do travel very slow. When operating as a ferry, they would have run her much faster, but our goal is to kind of cruise very leisurely, and people do really instantly relax when we depart the dock. It's just you can kind of feel the relaxation kick in.